Joining us live now is the Climate and Energy Program Director at the Australian Institute, Richie Merzian. Richie, good to see you. Thanks for your time this evening, appreciate it. What do you make of this pitch so far from the Prime Minister? It's going to include 50,000 household chargers, 1,000 public access stations. Your reaction, please.
It's been a long time coming. We've been waiting for an electric vehicle strategy. This one is a bit broader, covers all fuels, hydrogen and biofuels as well, but it delivers very little in terms of actual credible policies that we know work overseas, here in the UK in particular. We know that these policies work. Unfortunately, the government's plan is missing them. It's not really going to drive much in terms of electric vehicles, and it's not going to drive down emissions, unfortunately.
What policies are you referring to, the foreign ones?
So in Europe, what's quite popular is that there's actual incentives for electric vehicles that bring down the sticker price. There's actual mandates for manufacturers to have a set amount of emissions across their entire fleet, which means that they're encouraged to manufacture and bring more of their lower emissions vehicles to market. Even having something like a fleet target, the government won't even commit to making 100% of its own fleet electric, let alone encouraging other fleets to go electric too.
Norway and other Nordic countries are being held as the model when it comes to electric vehicle take-up, and there's no doubt that they are speeding ahead, but it's not accurate to compare our nations, is it, given the size differences and given the travel distances that we have to deal with in Australia?
If you look at the average commute, then it's actually quite similar. Oftentimes Australians will buy cars for that one-off trip rather than their regular trip, but their regular trip really isn't that far. It's to work or back, it's to school or back, it's to daycare or back. In that sense, the UK, Norway, Australia are all very similar. The reason why there's affordable electric vehicles in the UK, in Norway, is because they have the policy incentives and regulations to make them come here. Unfortunately, Australians are missing out on cars that are cheaper to maintain, cheaper to fuel, better for the climate, because the government doesn't have those policies in place. It's not rocket science. If you want affordable electric vehicles, if you want to bring down transport emissions, then you need credible policies, and that's what we're missing, and this plan doesn't deliver it. It's great to see that we finally have a plan. It's great to see there's a bit more money for charging infrastructure, but that's all there is, and there's not really that much to go off.
Those commute times, though, that you refer to being similar to Europe and here, that may be the case for metropolitan areas, but it would be a different story in Australian regional areas. Do you concede that that's where a difficulty will be?
Sure. There are bigger commutes for certain locations, and we're not saying that electric vehicles need to be mandated overnight. No one is saying that. Most households tend to have 2 cars on average. You can have one electric for the smaller commutes, and you can keep your petrol or your diesel car for the longer ones if you want to as well. What we don't have, though, is choice. The Prime Minister says, I want to bring choice to the market. Unfortunately, he hasn't done that. If you want variety in terms of electric vehicles, if you want affordability in terms of electric vehicles, then you need to mandate it. The industry itself has asked for stronger parameters around how to move forward with the transport industry and transport emissions. It just hasn't come. And instead, what you found is an absence of federal leadership, and state governments have rushed in their own electric vehicle taxes, which has just caused more chaos. Really, if the federal government wanted to improve things in the transport sector, it would have incentives for electric vehicles, fleet targets, and it would actually have a serious, incredible electric vehicle policy.
Well, it wants 1.7 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030. It's kind of an unofficial target. It doesn't matter if you get there or not. We do have at the moment, according to the ABS, 20 million registered cars. So that's a less than 10% target. It doesn't seem too ambitious from a government, I'll give it that. But don't you agree that, and you referred to industry, aren't manufacturers moving in that direction anyway?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Australia is a car taker, not a car maker. And so really manufacturers are moving towards 100% electric in terms of their entire fleet. So it will happen eventually. The problem is you're not going to get the more affordable models here if we don't have a market for it, if we don't have the right parameters and regulations, if we don't have a government that's putting in the incentives to bring them here. And that's what's really disappointing. Like, yes, anyone can buy an electric vehicle if you can afford it, but we want to make electric vehicles affordable to those who really need it, those who need to make every dollar count. And to do that, you can put in incentives right now. In Norway, for example, already 70% of new car sales are electric. In the UK, they're going to have 100% new car sales electric in 2030. In Glasgow, they're going to have a whole transport day on Wednesday, in one day, Australia time. That's going to focus on ambitious policies to drive this change. That's what we want to see in Australia. And Australia can also couple that with its own industry in making car parts, in making car batteries. So much potential if we actually have the industry, and that requires government backing it in.
Okay, Richie Merzian, appreciate it. Speaking to us live from the COP26 summit in Glasgow. Thanks, Richie.